Great. Great. So we're recording now. So again, you met me. I am delighted to be here. I am the founder of Tribal Clinicals, and I often start these things and I try to define what clinical trials are. I know some of you know what they are, but there are a few things that I wanted to talk about here. So we're looking at research investigations that are targeted at detecting, treating, and managing various diseases. So we're preventing them, we're detecting them, we're treating, and we're managing them. The emphasis really is moving more towards prevention and detection. As you know, we're living in a world of much technological advancement, AI, robotics, big data storage. So that is also affecting the pharmaceutical industry now. In terms of how these research investigations occur, they occur at various facilities across the globe. And so at the global level, what we do is we at the operations, we make sure that we select all the countries that are involved, all the investigators, and then we manage all the operations and then work on submitting that to the regulatory bodies. So that's what we do in a nutshell. I often like to talk about global trends because, I really believe that our market, the African clinical trials landscape, the Nigerian clinical trials landscape is just bursting with opportunity right now. It's really, we have a space where we can all conduct more trials, but for some reason, the operations piece is actually missing. And so if you look at this map, we conduct the least number of clinical trials. Now, nobody is keeping this information from us. It's just the way things have progressed. It started a lot more in North America, went to Europe, and then the APAC region and the Latin America region. But even in the areas where you can see on the map that it's red, we still do not, we form a very tiny percentage of the clinical trials landscape, whether it's the principal investigators who own clinical trials who are of African descent, or our own patients, or on our continent. And so that's that map in a nutshell. And then, of course, the good news is that when we started running trials, majority were being conducted in the United States. And now that is no longer the case. More and more, we're noticing that there are more trials being conducted globally. So we're looking at 52% of non-US trials right now. We're only conducting 32% in the US. And then for both US and non-US, we're at 5%. Of course, then there's the data that is not provided, right? And this is from the US clinicaltrials.gov is the largest repository of registered clinical trials in the world. There are other registries in Japan and the EMR, but the United States registry tends to be the largest one. Then if you look at the number of studies, or those are trials that are being run globally, Africa has, like I said, 14,900 there. And look at the amount. That's like the data that's going into 2023, actually, over 420,000. And then if you look at this curve, so we started at about in the 2000s, 1,200 and something trials now registered, right? And then now we're up to about 426,000 and climbing. But again, majority are being conducted abroad. And I want to pause here just to make sure, are you guys following? Please just wave or something if you are you're following what I'm saying and you're understanding and you're engaged. Fantastic. Yes, please. I always like to pause, I might just be speaking to myself here. So that is the curve. And what that means for us is that there is an opportunity here for us to engage more. Most trials are now going abroad because they're for cost-saving purposes. But also, if you look at the requirements now for submitting trials for approval in the FDA and the EMR and other big RAs or regulatory authorities, there is the request to actually have a diversity component. So you have to create a diversity plan for that. So that's something that is really important. But in addition to that, now you can have a diversity plan within your country, or you can go to another place and conduct those trials and be able to get the data and the results that you want. The other thing I like to talk about is how unique this industry is. And for me, I have to say, it has been a blessing in my life, because when I started 19 years ago, if someone had told me that I will be an advocate for expanding clinical trials access to African patients, I would probably have said no. Who? Absolutely not me, right? But it has been really great because I like the fact that it's decentralized. So every facility that we choose for clinical trial, so long as they have the right it's in the right therapeutic area, we have the right physician, we have the right patients, and they're qualified, right, to conduct a trial. It doesn't matter where they are. So it's a decentralized system that is globalized. And because we have one protocol, and that protocol gets conducted in the exact same way all across the globe. Now, the differences might be the little regulatory nuances, how we submit maybe in Nigeria, maybe the Nigerian Ministry of Health is a little bit, their requirements are a little bit different, how we ship in the investigational product might be a little bit different, but it's the same thing. So it's an equal opportunity landscape. It's also adaptable. So this sector is adaptable to what is going on in the world. As you saw with Ebola, COVID-19, and now monkeypox, there is when those types of pandemics arise, then we have to adapt to it. But it's also adaptable to the sector that you're in. Like I would say on our continent now, there is a rise in the middle class, and there's certain disease sets that are becoming more prevalent. So there's a need for clinical trials, and also the fact that the population now has the money, the financial resources to buy some of these drugs. But then it's also great because we can now allow for our communities to be aware of the benefits of this industry, and which I will get into. Transferable skills, so important for me. So there are times when I just manage trials here in the US. In fact, I have a very large project across 139 countries that I'm strategizing on. And it's interesting because I'm applying the same skills to trials that are in other countries. Once you have this skill set, whether as a lab tech, a nurse, a principal investigator, you can use it anywhere in the world. And there's no limitations on the professional background because it's a global. We have the operations piece, we have the development piece, we have the legal side. I mean, there's so much that is involved. Now, in terms of the players, this is going to be in a nutshell. We have the clinical research side. They are the heart of this industry. They're oversight by the principal investigator, a medical doctor or clinician. And then you have all the site staff who work to be a nurse, a lab tech, whatever that work. But the site level has its own operations. And then we have vendors who are in this industry. They could be lab vendors. They could be recruitment vendors. They also are part of the process. And then you have the sponsor who is financially vested and financially responsible for the conduct of the clinical trial. And that's really what I'm affiliated with. I work with large pharma and small biotech and biopharma companies to bring these innovative products to the market. And then we have other entities like governments and military and NGOs. I'm going to pause here. I want to talk about some of the challenges that we face, and hopefully this can tie things in on a very practical level. When we look at inspections and audits across the world, the biggest challenges really are related to principal investigator oversight. And what that means is that as a clinician, say I'm in a clinical research facility, I'm somewhere in Abuja, and I'm conducting, let's say, a clinical trial for malaria, right? Some form of malaria. But so I understand the clinical side, but then how do I translate that to my facility, to the patients who are participating, right? So then I have to adhere to the protocol. I have to understand that, okay, this is exactly what we're doing, but then how do I ensure that my staff are following this procedure? That's very important. Delegating, I have to delegate. I have to make sure that, if a certain procedure has to be conducted by me, I do it. If it's conducted by my nurse practitioner, I do it. And then training, huge in this industry. And when I'm speaking, I'm giving this information also for people who want to work in this industry, right? Because it's the same methodology of thinking. So training, meetings, you got to really have the knowledge and the savoir-faire, like we would say in French, to be able to execute at the level of the clinical research side. There are documents, there are regulatory documents that support this industry, that support the data that is being captured for patients. It's wonderful because, like I said, it's globalized, so you can conduct a trial from anywhere in the world. There are lots of databases being used. And then, of course, there are a lot of processes that are there. So those are some of the challenges that investigators face across the globe. It's the same challenges, and many of these have resulted to quite a few findings. And so what I decided was that looking at the world, what are the practices in that I can implement for our own principal investigators, for our own professionals who want to come into this industry? And so it's really, for me, it is essential that our own patients of African descent participate in clinical trials, whether it's in Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya or South Africa. Really important, because as you know, clinical trials also help the public health system. So there are many cases in various countries in Latin America where they start conducting clinical trials. The funds from that, help a lot of patients, particularly in the rural areas. And then that automatically filters through into the public health system. So those are things that, we want to look into, that I'm really passionate about. And so we do it two ways. We're training principal investigators on the practical way of setting up and running a clinical trial site wherever you are. How do you do it, and how do you ensure that these procedures are implemented? Because like I said, everything starts on the clinical research site. That's where everything happens. That's where all the data is coming from. That's where the patients are benefiting from this incredible research. And then we also train African research professionals. And like I said before, healthcare access for African patients, we have to incorporate the clinical trial system into it so we can impact the public health system. Are you guys still following? I want to make sure that you guys are here. I know this is a mouthful. I will be wrapping up shortly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
We're with you.
Fantastic. This is lovely. Very early for me, but I do get up very early anyways. And then, I have to do some meditation and then settle. Mm-hmm. But qualifications, let's get into that. I know people often ask me this question: what qualifications do you need, Tengu? And I always say, listen, as a principal investigator, you ought to be a clinician, of course, with a clinical background. But as a clinical research professional, I am I don't have a clinical background. I pair up with my clinical side because I head operations and I pair with my clinical side. So it's one of those things where, it's really based on the way that you think. We have a lot of things like critical thinking in clinical trials, looking at a situation from first at the minimal level and then the bird's eye view. You want to look at 360-degree thinking, what that action that I'm doing right now, how does it affect us downstream? If a patient comes to my clinical research site and they're supposed to sign the informed consent, which is a document that you have to sign before participating, and for some reason I start procedures and the informed consent is not signed, obviously that's not good. It's not good for the safety of the patient. But how then do I document that? How do I make sure that that does not occur again? So always closing the loop. We talk about downstream effects, right? The data, we conduct clinical trials so we have safe patients and great data that we can submit to the regulatory authorities, right, while benefiting the community in which we are. So if I'm not protecting my patient has an adverse event, something happens to them, and I'm not documenting it properly, then that skews the data. And so we always, those are the ways that we think. So really that's what you need, right, in this industry. And there's such a need. We can never staff enough clinical research facilities and professionals because, if you think about it, I'm sure there's somebody right now sitting somewhere in the world thinking of a product that they can bring to the market. So that's really where we are with that. I talked about specialized knowledge, 360-degree thinking, downstream thinking. And so, I'm going to end here with this. There is a quote that I always repeat to myself every day, and it's from Thomas Troward, and he was a New Age philosopher. And he says, my mind is a center for divine operations. The divine operations is always for expansion and fuller expression. And this means the production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in the past experience, though proceeding out of it by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate in the same manner with me. Consequently, in my own special world, of which I am the center, it must move forward to produce new ideas always in advance of any that have gone before. What that means is just that we are a center for divine operations. In clinical trials, I see myself as a center for divine clinical trials operations. But in our own lives, if you're listening here, and we are channels for divine expression. And so clinical trials really, for me, allow us to be able to channel this wonderful operations from the divine and help patients with them, and also help medical doctors and help the community, help nurses, lab techs, and healthcare. So that is something that is really important. And this is the end of my presentation. And please, if you have any questions, I don't know how this is set up, but I am here if you guys have questions, or if we are wrapping things up here. But I thank you guys for listening and taking time from your precious day to listen to some of the ideas that I have to share. And of course, I'm really humbled and grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you. We greatly appreciate your presentation. It was well packed. And I'm sure that participants right now are so delighted to have heard from you. A lot of them were disconnecting, but each time you asked if you're with me, they kept on responding loud and clear. So which means every time we appreciate the fact that you're excited to present, and we're looking forward to hearing from you in subsequent summits as well. So please, guys, if there's anyone who has a question, if you have a question, do well to leave them here in the chat. If you can look at the chat right now, you can see a lot of people already commenting. And like we do to every speaker, please, everybody, give a virtual round of applause to our presenter. Just put them in the chat. If you can, unmute your mic and then clap so that we can hear you clapping. Anyhow you want to do it, just do well to tell our presenter that you did a very amazing job. Thank you so much. Well appreciated. Thank you so much. We are very delighted. So moving on, please, if you have a question, leave them in the chat. If you have a question, leave them in the chat. She is very much available to respond to as much questions that we have. You see Mercy Ilya saying, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I see Dr. Mbabea, I hope I pronounced that well. Also saying, thank you for the presentation. I see Dr. Stella saying, wow, thank you for the beautiful presentation, Ma. You can see obviously that it was quite an amazing time. Aisha is saying, thank you for all the wonderful presentation. And someone is asking a question. I think we have questions coming in. I'm going to be reading them out. If you can also look at the chat, you'll see the questions that have been dropped. So I think the question now is, how do you tackle ethical issues in clinical research? So I think you could take it up.
So this is a question that often comes up, and I think most people don't realize is that this is a system that is very well polished, and there are constant laws that are being implemented. Now, ethical issues I always say it happens in two forms, right? So if part of the clinical research laws, it clearly states that you have to administer an informed consent before a patient is enrolled into a clinical trial study. And then maybe some unscrupulous company or something comes in and enrolls that patient, and the patient doesn't even know that they're participating in a clinical research study, then it's a matter of education. And that's what we're here, because there are many cases where you have clinical trials that are being conducted in remote areas on our continent, and these patients are not even aware that they are in a clinical trial. So I absolutely agree with you. So that's the first way that I hope I look at ethical issues. But ethical issues in terms of, like, I have participated in clinical trials. So the people often tell me, but I'm like a guinea pig. I said, no. The trials that are being run globally, remember this, they have gone through a lot of safety. And clinical trials, especially conducted by governments and pharmaceutical companies, really incorporate the safety piece in it. And I would not be this long in this industry if it wasn't something that I've seen help so many patients. So ethics does come into play, but I'll give you an example. We currently have a patient on a project that has had, this is a very complex, it's a HER2 positive expression. And I know why people often think that I'm a doctor, because I work with so many medical doctors and I work on very complex projects, but it's a specific tumor that expresses in a certain way. We have a patient who's been on this product for 40 cycles, and I often think, what if that was one of our own African patients who was on this product and they're staying alive? So we have to educate people. There are initiatives where when we work with communities, we make sure that the principal investigator educates patients about what it means. What does it mean for you to participate in a clinical trial? My mother right now just had bilateral cataract surgery, that's OU, and with an IOL, that's an intraocular lens implant. And I think, what about our own patients? What if we had the clinical trials that are being run for cataracts or glaucoma, right? So I think ethically, it's a matter of educating people and helping them understand that, listen, somebody cannot just come in and give you some product that has not been approved for one and have you be on this product. We have to make sure that we are educating medical doctors, we're educating patients. When a patient comes to a clinical research site, there is, we call it the informed consent process. They have to be explained in their language what they're being involved in. Should things change in the clinical trial, we have to explain that to them. So I think ethically, the most important thing is when you run trials and you run patient-centric trials, which means that we're here to help patients, then it really, the ethical piece, I think it's not too bad, right? Because then it's education. But when people don't know, they don't know what they know. So, and we also have an issue where we train a lot because investigators who start within the first 3 years of running trials have a lot of issues because they don't know what they don't know. So that's really what we're here. It's education, you guys. Sorry, I keep hammering it. It's education that is really important. Dr. Tunga, I hope that answers your question.
Dr. Tunga, I hope you're still here. And she's
was it him who asked that?
Yes, it was him, yes. And he has said that. He has said that. Yes, wonderful. That he has quite responded. And Dr. Joseph Madu is also asking a question here, although not a question, but just to know how you could get your contact details. I'm sure you have read that. That's all
I did. I do a lot of webinars myself. So my staff is here. I forgot to mention, they're incredible. They support this company. So B or Vera, if you guys can get Dr. Madu's information, and if you can actually post our website on the chat as well, and all our details, the Facebook group, and and our details, and my email address as well, our email address, so that Dr. Madu, we can be able to start a conversation with him. And then just grab his contact information as well. He's he's of the Clinical Pharmacists Association of Nigeria. So just grab that. That way we can serve and support, of course. That's what we're here for.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And there's, I think, one more question, this time offline, not written in the chat. And the question is there a less expensive way to set up as a clinical trial expert? Like a less expensive way to set up?
So it's not a matter of expensive. What we do is we definitely do have expenses related to setting up a clinical research set, and it's really minimal, right? I mean, compared to what the benefits are. I think that I think I'm the only one doing this right now, helping our own physicians to set up. So, but I would say that what we want to look at is always the long game, right? I always say we look at the long game and we play the short game, right? So you want to set up for a clinical trial. That's what we do. We help you. We show you the resources. We create all the documents that you need. And then we give you the clinical trials, right? We make sure that, you have a platform for clinical trials, but it's not expensive. It really isn't. It's a matter of making sure that, you're trained, your staff is trained, they have all the support that they need, and that type of thing. And then you have to understand as well, we also help you when you get a trial, how do you manage the budget? Because it's paid, right? You're being paid to conduct the trial. Your patients get a stipend. And how do you do all of that? So when you actually look at the cost, it really is not expensive. Most medical doctors who start conducting clinical trials, and I've set up so many, they end up doing just that. because that money that comes in is just incredible in terms of how you can use it to grow your practice. You can use it to impact, whether it's a hospital system, you can use it to educate the community about clinical trials. So it's an investment, right? It's something that you invest in, and then you look at how more patients in my community can participate and get health benefits and get the best medical care while they're in my clinical trial. So yeah, if you can also get in touch with me and we can discuss further if that is helpful.